I'll convert this transcript into properly formatted paragraphs with correct punctuation while preserving every word. If you can fly that helicopter, I'll marry you right here and now. Then I hope you're ready for takeoff, Mr. Ellery. When a billionaire CEO mocked the cleaning lady in front of his entire company, he thought it was just another joke until she climbed into his helicopter and did something that left every executive speechless. Fly that helicopter and I'll marry you. Those were the words that made the entire boardroom roar with laughter. Everyone except one person. The woman holding the MOP.IT happened on a humid Friday afternoon at a company retreat in Sedona, Arizona. The Ellery Group's senior executives were lounging by the resort's private hangar, drinking imported champagne while the sun turned the desert gold. Grant Ellery, the man who owned everything in sight, the building, the aircraft, the people's time, stood in the center, relishing the attention. He was known for being brilliant but ruthless, charming yet cold. His words could make or break careers, and he loved the power that came with that. Janelle Forsythe had been cleaning the company's offices for nearly a year. She was quiet, almost invisible, the kind of woman who moved through hallways unseen, carrying a mop and a small radio that played old soul songs. Nobody really talked to her except to hand her trash or remind her of a spill. But on that afternoon, her name and her composure would stop everyone in their tracks. Grant had just finished a speech about success. "You want to know what separates winners from losers?" he said, pacing in front of his employees. "Winners take risks. Losers clean up after them." His audience laughed again. Some nervously, some because it was safer to laugh than to stay silent. Janelle, who'd been wiping down a table nearby, paused for a moment, but said nothing. That small pause was enough. Grant noticed that he turned to her with a grin that looked more like a dare. "Hey, Janelle, right?" She nodded slightly, her voice calm. "Yes, sir." Grant gestured toward the sleek black helicopter parked just a few yards away. "Tell you what," he said. "If you can fly that thing, I'll marry you." The group burst into laughter, genuine this time. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "He's savage." Grant loved it. He took a sip of champagne and smirked, expecting her to blush or retreat. But instead she looked at him with a stillness that made him slightly uncomfortable. "I might take you up on that," she said quietly. The laughter died down just a bit. People exchanged uncertain looks. The cleaner had spoken back. Grant raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? You can fly?" Janelle set down her rag and walked closer, her tone still gentle. "I used to." There was something about the way she said it, steady, almost sorrowful, that shifted the air. But Grant, too proud to read the room, leaned in with mock curiosity. "What were you? A pilot in another life?" She met his eyes. "Something like that." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Grant chuckled and waved his hand dismissively. "All right, then, Major Forsythe," he said sarcastically. "Show us what you've got." The executives laughed again, though softer this time. Janelle didn't respond. She simply picked up her cleaning cart and left. For the rest of the evening, the joke spread like wildfire. People whispered her name, shared memes in the company group chat. The cleaning pilot. Grant played along, acting amused. But deep down, something about her calm reply stayed with him. It wasn't defiance. It was certainty. The next morning, Grant arrived early at the hangar for a short helicopter ride to a nearby golf course. To his surprise, Janelle was already there, standing near the aircraft in her plain blue uniform, her hair tied neatly back. "You're early," Grant said, his tone sharp. "I don't like leaving things unfinished," she replied. Grant blinked. "You're serious?" Janelle shrugged lightly. "You said if I can fly it, you'd marry me." He laughed, looking over at the pilot who had just arrived. "All right, fine. Let's see it then. But if you crash it, that's on you." "I won't crash," she said softly. The pilot looked uneasy. "Sir, she can't just—" Grant cut him off. "Relax. It's not like she's actually going to start it." But she was already walking toward the cockpit, each step deliberate, confident. The others followed behind, curious, some recording on their phones. Grant folded his arms, smiling like a man who just secured another round of entertainment. Inside the cockpit, Janelle sat down and started flipping switches. Her hands moved like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The whir of the blades began to spin, the wind kicking up dust across the hangar floor. Grant's smile faltered. "What the hell?" he muttered. The pilot's expression changed from irritation to disbelief. "Sir, she knows what she's doing." The laughter outside stopped completely. Everyone watched as the cleaning lady, the one they had all dismissed, brought the helicopter to life. She turned her head toward Grant through the glass and gave a single nod, calm and steady, before lifting the machine off the ground. But what happened next would make every single person there question what they thought they knew about her and about themselves. The sound of the helicopter blades still echoed in everyone's ears that night. Nobody at the retreat could talk about anything else. The cleaning lady, Janelle Forsythe, had flown Grant Ellery's private helicopter like it was second nature. She didn't just start it. She lifted it, hovered it, and brought it back down smoother than most trained pilots could. By the time they all returned to the resort, word had spread across every department. The same people who laughed the loudest earlier were now whispering her name in disbelief. Some said it had to be staged. Others thought she'd somehow tricked the system or used remote control tech. Grant, however, didn't say a word. For the first time, the man who always had something to say was quiet. That silence didn't come from respect. Not yet. It came from confusion and something he hadn't felt in years. Embarrassment. Later that night, long after the crowd had gone to bed, Grant sat alone at the bar overlooking the canyon. The desert wind brushed against the windows while he replayed the scene in his mind. The way she moved, the certainty in her eyes, the calmness that didn't match her role. He'd built his life believing that power was about being loud, visible, and in control. But that woman, who scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans, had just taken control of his aircraft, his audience, and his ego without saying more than 10 words. "Who the hell is she?" he whispered to himself. The next morning, he got his answer. Janelle came to work like nothing had happened. Same blue uniform, same quiet routine. She walked into the main lobby of the Ellery Group headquarters in Phoenix, mop in hand, while everyone pretended not to stare. A few smiled awkwardly. Others couldn't meet her eyes. She simply went about her job, polite but distant. Grant had her called into his office. His assistant, nervous, spoke softly. "Miss Forsythe, Mr. Ellery would like to see you upstairs." Janelle didn't flinch. "Tell him I'll come after I finish the lobby." No one had ever told Grant Ellery to wait. When she finally arrived, he was standing near the window overlooking the skyline. "Quite the performance," he said without turning around. She placed her hands behind her back. "Wasn't meant to be one." Grant turned to face her, studying her expression. "You're not who you say you are." Janelle's voice stayed level. "I never said who I was, sir." He tried to read her, but she gave him nothing. Just composure. "You flew that helicopter better than my pilot," he said. "How?" "I used to fly," she replied. Grant leaned against his desk. "For who? Some private company?" Her gaze drifted toward the window. "For the U.S. Air Force." He blinked. "You're joking." "I'm not." Grant frowned, trying to piece it together. "You were military. What were you doing cleaning floors?" She hesitated, her jaw tightening slightly. "Starting over." That answer irritated him. Starting over from what? Janelle finally looked at him. "Losing everything." The words landed heavy. There was no anger in her voice, no attempt to gain sympathy, just truth. She continued slowly, as if pulling each word from memory. "My husband was a pilot, too. We served together. Afghanistan, 2013. His aircraft didn't make it back." Her eyes lowered. "After that, I couldn't sit in a cockpit anymore. The sound of rotors made my hands shake. So I left, sold the house, moved states, took whatever work kept me grounded." Grant's arrogance faltered. "I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to," she said softly. "Not everything needs to be announced." The office stayed quiet for a while. Outside, the hum of traffic rose from the city streets. Grant cleared his throat. "Why take a job here?" I wanted a place where nobody asked questions. People walk past cleaners like we're part of the wallpaper. Grant exhaled through his nose, unsure what to say. For once, he didn't have the upper hand. You humiliated me in front of everyone, she said, her tone still even. I could have embarrassed you back, but I didn't. I just showed you what you didn't expect. He met her eyes. And what's that? That not everyone beneath you is below you. Grant didn't reply. He couldn't. That line pierced deeper than he'd ever admit. After she left, he stood there for a long time, staring at the city. The woman he'd mocked had lived through things his money could never buy him out of. Loss, pain, rebuilding from ashes. Her strength came from something real, something earned. By the end of the week, the company had quietly changed. People greeted Janelle with respect now. Even the executives who once ignored her started offering small gestures. A thank you, a held door, a smile. She accepted them with grace, but never lingered. She still cleaned, still clocked out at 5, and still walked to the bus stop with the same slow, thoughtful stride. Grant watched her from his window one evening. He couldn't explain why, but that same stillness that once made him uncomfortable now fascinated him. There was something humbling about her silence. It carried more weight than all his speeches combined. But what Grant didn't know yet was that the story wasn't over. The retreat, the flight, the revelation, they were only the beginning of a deeper shift he didn't see coming. The following week felt different inside Ellery Group headquarters. The laughter that once echoed down the marble hallways had quieted, replaced by an odd mix of tension and curiosity. Everyone had seen the video. A few seconds of shaky footage showing Janelle Forsythe piloting the CEO's helicopter like she owned the sky. It spread across employee group chats, then to social media circles before being quietly taken down by corporate PR. But by then, the story had already made its way into whispers, rumors, and late-night conversations. To most, it was just gossip. To Grant Ellery, it was a bruise that refused to fade. He had built his empire on control. The board, his employees, his image, everything. But this, a cleaning lady turning his private joke into a viral lesson on humility, that was something he couldn't manage or contain. During the next executive meeting, Grant sat at the head of the glass table, his expression unreadable. Across from him, department heads exchanged nervous glances. Everyone knew what not to mention, but that didn't stop them from thinking about it. Finally, his COO, a tall woman named Janet Corcoran, broke the silence. Grant, about the incident at the retreat, people are still talking. HR says morale's actually up. They think it humanized you. Grant looked up sharply. Humanized me? She hesitated. Yes, I think they saw a different side of you. He gave a short, dry laugh. I wasn't trying to show a different side. I was trying to run a company, not a charity for second chances. The words stung the room. One of the newer executives shifted uncomfortably. Another avoided eye contact altogether. But then, to everyone's surprise, Grant added quietly, "Still, she can fly." Janet leaned forward. "She's remarkable, Grant. Maybe it's time to stop treating people like they're defined by their job titles." Grant didn't answer. He looked out the window instead at the sun glinting off the downtown skyline. Deep down, he hated to admit that Janet was right. But something inside him wasn't ready to surrender to that truth. Later that afternoon, while walking through the lobby, Grant spotted Janelle. She was polishing a brass handrail near the main elevator. For a brief moment, he considered walking past, but something compelled him to stop. "Forsythe," he said. She turned, calm as always. "Mr. Ellery." He studied her. "You've become quite the topic around here." She didn't look flattered. "That's temporary." "You think so?" "I know so." Grant smirked faintly. "I'm not sure I do." She paused, then said quietly, "Then maybe you'll remember to treat people differently next time." He opened his mouth to reply, but the elevator chimed. She stepped inside, pressed the button, and said before the doors closed, "Some lessons are expensive. Don't waste this one." Grant stood there staring at the elevator doors long after they shut. That brief exchange stayed with him all day. By the end of the week, Grant called a surprise company-wide meeting, something he rarely did. The auditorium filled with hundreds of employees buzzing with speculation. When he walked on stage, he looked uncharacteristically subdued. "I've always believed success is about dominance," he began. "About being the loudest, smartest, most relentless person in the room. But lately, I've realized something else. Sometimes the people who say the least have already seen more than we ever will." The crowd listened, unsure where he was going. "There's someone here who reminded me of that," he continued. "Someone I wronged. Someone who showed me that leadership isn't about how high you fly, but how grounded you stay." For the first time, Grant's voice softened. "Miss Forsythe, would you come up here?" The room shifted. Heads turned as Janelle, sitting in the back row in her work uniform, hesitated. She didn't want the attention, but the crowd began to clap. First a few, then everyone. Reluctantly, she walked to the stage. Grant faced her. "You taught me something valuable," he said, "and I think the company needs to hear it, too." Janelle spoke gently into the microphone. "I didn't mean to teach anyone a lesson, sir. I just wanted to show that everyone carries something unseen." The audience grew silent. Grant looked at her with genuine respect. "You've done more than that." Then, from somewhere in the crowd, someone shouted, "Tell us how you learned to fly." Laughter broke out, but Janelle didn't smile. "My husband taught me," she said simply. "And the day I lost him, I thought I'd lost that part of myself too. I was wrong." The room went still again. Grant swallowed hard, caught off guard by her honesty. When the meeting ended, no one left talking about quarterly profits or sales targets. They talked about Janelle, her grace, her strength, and the quiet dignity that humbled an empire. Grant walked her to the elevator afterward. "You could have destroyed me," he said softly. She shook her head. "That wouldn't have taught you anything." He smiled faintly. "You're right. I needed to be reminded that being powerful isn't the same as being right." She gave him a small, knowing look. "Then you're already learning." The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside and turned back toward him. "You'll find more strength in listening than talking, Mr. Ellery." The doors closed, leaving Grant alone again, staring at his reflection in the mirrored panel. For once, he didn't see a man in control. He saw someone learning what control really meant. But as his company's culture began to change, not everyone welcomed it. And soon, the mockery that started this all would spark something far bigger and more personal than either of them could have expected. 2 weeks after the company meeting, Grant Ellery decided to host another executive retreat, this time at a private property just outside Flagstaff, Arizona, surrounded by pine-covered hills and open sky. It was meant to be a fresh start, a symbolic way of turning the page. Yet beneath the polite smiles and carefully rehearsed speeches, something electric lingered between him and Janelle Forsythe, an unfinished conversation that hovered like a shadow. Janelle wasn't supposed to attend. She was there only because Grant requested her presence under the guise of logistic support. That alone stirred murmurs among the staff. Some joked he was trying to impress her. Others thought he was planning another public apology. But the truth was simpler and deeper. He wanted to understand her. When the group arrived, Grant's helicopter stood gleaming on the tarmac once again, catching the sunlight like a dare. Most people walked past it with awe. Janelle, however, glanced at it the way one looks at an old photograph, with a quiet ache only she could feel that evening. As the executives gathered around a fire pit after dinner, the conversation inevitably circled back to the same memory. "Grant," said Janet Corcoran, smiling cautiously, "are you going to make any more marriage offers tonight?" The table laughed. Grant rolled his eyes but played along. "Depends who's volunteering," he said. His tone was lighter this time, but when he noticed Janelle standing a few steps away clearing glasses, his chest tightened. He stood up and walked toward her. "Still flying under the radar, Miss Forsythe." Her lips curved faintly. "It's quieter down here." He glanced at the helicopter again. "I've been thinking about that day." She didn't respond. "I realized something," he said. "That flight wasn't about you proving me wrong. It was about you reminding me what courage looks like." Janelle looked at him, her expression unreadable. Courage isn't loud. It's just the decision to keep going when no one expects you to. Her words hit him harder than he expected. You make it sound simple. It's not, she said. But it's always necessary. They stood there in silence for a moment, the crackle of fire filling the space between them. Then one of the junior executives shouted from across the patio, "Come on, Grant. Why don't you let the major give us another show?" The laughter was instant. Grant's first instinct was to snap at him, but Janelle spoke first. "If that's what you want," she said calmly. The group quieted. Even Grant froze. "Janelle, you don't have to." "I know," she said, "but sometimes people only listen when they see." Without another word, she walked toward the helicopter. The others followed, a mixture of excitement and disbelief spreading through the crowd. Grant hesitated, unsure whether to stop her or let her go. The night air was cool, the stars bright above the dark outline of the mountains. Janelle climbed into the cockpit, her movements deliberate, familiar. The machine came alive under her touch. The lights, the switches, the blades slicing through the stillness. "Grant," Janet whispered, standing beside him. She really shouldn't be flying at night. But Grant didn't move. "She knows what she's doing." The helicopter lifted off slowly, gracefully, its rotors stirring the air like a heartbeat. Gasps rippled through the group as it ascended above the treeline, the lights from the cabin glowing softly against the dark sky. For a few moments, the sound drowned everything else. The laughter, the chatter, even the music playing from the outdoor speakers. All that remained was the sight of a woman reclaiming something that once defined her. Inside the cockpit, Janelle felt her pulse steady, her breath align with the rhythm of the machine. It had been years since she'd flown under the stars. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt peace. Not from forgetting, but from remembering without breaking. Below, Grant stood still, his face illuminated by the aircraft's lights. For a man who'd spent his life chasing control, this was something entirely different. He wasn't in charge. He was witnessing it, humbled, silent, changed. Janelle circled once above the property before bringing the helicopter down. The landing was flawless. When the blades slowed and the engine quieted, the crowd broke into applause. Not the mocking kind this time, but genuine admiration. Grant walked forward as she stepped out. "You didn't have to do that," he said, his voice low. "I know," she replied, removing her headset. "But you did need to see it again, to believe it wasn't luck the first time." He exhaled. "I believe it now." She met his eyes. "Then stop using people's pasts as punchlines. You never know what they've survived." Grant didn't speak. He couldn't. Her tone wasn't angry. It was final. As she walked back toward the main lodge, the others stood in silence. Janet turned to Grant and murmured, "You realize she just made you look like a student in front of your own class?" He managed a faint smile. "Good. Maybe I needed a teacher." The rest of the night passed quietly. No one joked anymore. The next morning, Grant ordered a company-wide initiative. Scholarships for veterans, hiring programs for service members, and an internal policy ensuring all staff, no matter their position, received recognition for their work. But none of it was about PR. It was about her. Yet, even as Grant tried to make amends publicly, a storm was building privately, one that would test both his sincerity and Janelle's faith in forgiveness. The following Monday, back in Phoenix, the office buzzed with talk about the retreat. Videos of Janelle's midnight flight had once again found their way online before the company could stop them. Employees whispered about her skill, her composure, her story. For once, the gossip wasn't cruel. It was reverent. People admired her, but admiration has a strange way of turning into intrusion. By midweek, reporters started calling. Someone had leaked her name to a local news outlet. Within days, the story appeared under a headline that read, "Billionaire CEO humbled by former Air Force pilot turned cleaner." The article painted Janelle as a tragic hero, a woman who lost everything only to expose the arrogance of the powerful. It went viral overnight. Grant's PR team panicked. Investors started asking questions. Board members wanted to know how a private incident became a national headline. Inside the company, opinions split. Some saw Janelle as an inspiration, while others resented the attention she brought. Grant summoned her to his office again. She entered quietly, her uniform neat, her face calm. "You wanted to see me?" He gestured for her to sit. "You've seen the news." "I have," she replied. He sighed. "This wasn't supposed to happen. You're being dragged into something ugly." She gave a faint, knowing smile. "You mean you're being dragged into something ugly?" He met her eyes. For once, there was no hint of superiority. "You're right, but you don't deserve this either. You didn't ask to be a story." "No," she said softly. "But maybe some stories need to be told, even if they make people uncomfortable." Grant leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "The board wants a formal statement. They think I should spin this as a leadership lesson about humility, teamwork, whatever corporate nonsense makes it sound tidy." Janelle looked unimpressed. "And what do you want to say?" He hesitated. "That I was wrong." The room fell quiet. Janelle studied him, trying to decide if he meant it. "Then say that," she said finally. "Say it like a man, not a headline." Grant nodded slowly. "Would you stand with me when I do?" She frowned. "You want me beside you at a press conference?" "Yes, I want people to hear the truth from both of us." She considered that for a long moment. "I'll think about it." Later that evening, Janelle sat in her small apartment on the outskirts of Phoenix, watching the news replay her own face on the screen. They called her the humble hero, but the attention made her skin crawl. She had spent years trying to live quietly, to rebuild without being defined by her past. Now the world wanted to turn her pain into entertainment. Her phone buzzed. It was a number she hadn't seen in years. An old friend from the Air Force, Captain Renee Dalton. "Janelle," the voice on the line said warmly. "I saw the news. You haven't changed a bit." Janelle laughed softly. "I feel like I have. Maybe too much." "You were always the calm one," Renee said. "You know, your husband would have been proud." The mention of his name made Janelle's throat tighten. "I hope so. You showed the world that dignity isn't lost when you start over. That matters." Janelle closed her eyes. "It's just strange having people watch me again. I didn't want this." "I know," Renee said gently. "But maybe the universe wanted it for you." The next morning, she made her decision. When the press conference began, the entire building seemed to hold its breath. Dozens of reporters filled the atrium. Cameras clicked. Grant stood behind the podium, a single sheet of paper in front of him, his usual confidence replaced by visible humility. Janelle stood off to the side, dressed neatly but simply, not as a symbol, just as herself. Grant began. "I said something cruel. I mocked someone who deserved my respect, not my arrogance. Janelle Forsythe showed me what true leadership looks like, not from a position of power, but from character. I've spent years talking about success, but she showed me grace." The cameras flashed. He continued, his voice unsteady but sincere. "I used to think that those who worked beneath me couldn't teach me anything. I was wrong, and I hope every CEO, every boss watching this learns that lesson before someone like Janelle has to teach it to them." He stepped back, motioning toward her. The reporters leaned forward. "Miss Forsythe," one of them called out, "do you forgive him?" Janelle took a slow breath. "Forgiveness isn't a favor," she said. "It's a decision not to carry someone else's ignorance any longer. I forgave him the moment I landed that helicopter." The room fell silent. Grant looked down, humbled. When the press conference ended, Janelle turned to leave. He called after her quietly. "Thank you." She paused at the door. "Don't thank me. Do better." That night, the video spread online again, this time with a different tone. It wasn't just about a billionaire's humiliation. It was about accountability, humanity, and the power of grace under fire. For the first time, both of their names trended side by side, not as adversaries, but as proof that respect can rebuild what pride destroys. But just when the dust seemed to settle, the real test came. Not from the world outside, but from the one inside, Grant himself. A choice that would show whether his apology was a moment or a transformation. A week after the press conference, Ellery Group looked and felt like a different place. For the first time in years, people actually smiled when they walked into the building. The atmosphere had shifted from fear to respect. Even the janitorial team, once invisible, was treated like part of the company family. The echo of Janelle's words seemed to live in the air itself. Grant Ellery, the man once known for his ruthless perfectionism, found himself doing something no one thought he was capable of: listening. He started eating lunch in the company cafeteria instead of his private office. The first day he did it, conversations stopped mid-sentence. By the end of the week, employees began joining him at the long tables, uncertain at first, then more comfortably each day. He didn't give speeches, didn't command attention. He just listened to interns, to receptionists, even to the cleaning staff. He noticed things he'd never paid attention to before: how tired the night shift looked when they clocked out, how the security guard always stood a little straighter when greeted by name, how a few kind words could change someone's entire mood. It was new territory for a man who'd built walls so high even success couldn't see over them. But change, no matter how sincere, never comes without resistance. During a board meeting later that month, some of the senior executives voiced their concerns. One of them, Paul Drayden, a man known for his blunt pragmatism, spoke first. "Grant, this redemption tour of yours, it's making people nervous. Investors are asking if you've gone soft." Grant leaned back in his chair. "If treating people with dignity makes me soft, then maybe that's the problem." Paul pressed on. "It's not about dignity. It's about optics. You're turning this company into a social experiment." Janet Corcoran interrupted, her tone sharp. "He's turning it into a decent place to work." The tension hung in the air. Grant looked around the table, half the faces loyal, half calculating. "Gentlemen," he said evenly, "we built this empire by chasing numbers. Maybe it's time we start chasing integrity too." A few clapped softly. Paul didn't. After the meeting, Grant walked into his office, exhausted, but oddly calm. He glanced at the framed photo on his desk, not of himself or his company, but of the helicopter that started it all. A reminder of the moment he lost his pride and found his humanity. Just then, his phone rang. It was Janelle. "Mr. Ellery," she said, "you've been making headlines again." He chuckled. "Hopefully better ones this time." "They're saying you're becoming a reformer," she teased lightly. "I'm just trying to make things right." "Then you already are," she said. "Just remember, real change isn't what people see on camera. It's what you do when no one's watching." Her words stayed with him. That night, Grant drove to her neighborhood, not in one of his luxury cars, but in an old SUV he hadn't used in years. He parked outside her modest apartment complex and waited until she came out carrying a small bag of groceries. When she saw him, she looked surprised, but not uncomfortable. "You lost." He smiled. "Maybe. I thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing." She nodded toward the grocery bag. "Doing fine. Still working. Still living." He followed her to the door, offering to carry the bag, but she waved him off. Inside, the apartment was simple but warm. Bookshelves lined with worn paperbacks, photos of her husband in uniform, and a single model helicopter on a side table. "You kept it," he said softly. "I built it," she replied. "When I couldn't fly anymore, I built models. It helped." Grant took a slow breath. "I've been thinking about starting a foundation for veterans who can't find work after service. I'd like you to help me lead it." She blinked, taken aback. "I clean your offices, Mr. Ellery. I'm not a board member." He shook his head. "You're exactly what it needs. Someone who understands what rebuilding really means." For the first time since he'd met her, she looked genuinely unsure. "You really think people will take orders from a janitor?" "I think they'll follow someone who's earned respect," he said quietly. "And that's you." Janelle studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You've changed." "Maybe I'm finally learning," he said. A few weeks later, the Foresight Initiative launched, a company-funded program offering scholarships and employment to veterans transitioning to civilian life. Grant made sure Janelle's name was on the project front and center. During the launch event, she stood beside him on stage once again, but this time the balance had shifted. They weren't CEO and cleaner anymore. They were equals, bound by something greater than position or pride. After the speech, as the crowd dispersed, Janelle turned to him. "You've built something good here. Don't lose it chasing the next win." He nodded. "Not this time." She smiled, the kind of smile that carried both peace and closure. "Then you finally understand what flying means." Grant looked at her curiously. "Flying?" She gestured toward the sky. "It's not about the height. It's about the trust. Knowing you can lift off and still find your way back." He stood there silent, watching her walk away. The desert air was warm, the sun just beginning to set behind the horizon. For the first time, Grant felt like a man grounded not by failure, but by purpose. But while their chapter seemed to close on peace, something deeper had taken root. A legacy that neither of them fully grasped yet. One that would ripple far beyond the walls of Ellery Group. 6 months later, the Foresight Initiative had grown far beyond what anyone expected. What began as a small internal program at Ellery Group became a nationwide effort helping veterans reintegrate into the workforce. Companies across the country reached out asking how they could replicate it. News outlets covered the story not for its drama this time, but for its impact. In the public eye, Grant Ellery had transformed. The once feared billionaire was now a man people described as thoughtful, even compassionate. Yet, despite the attention, he rarely spoke about his transformation. When interviewers asked what caused the shift, his answer was always the same. "A woman named Janelle Forsythe taught me what leadership really means." He meant it every time. Janelle, on the other hand, kept her distance from the spotlight. She continued working at the company, not as a cleaner anymore, but as a mentor for the program she helped build. She refused titles, refused interviews, refused the notion that she was a hero. When a journalist once asked why she turned down recognition, she answered simply, "If you do something right, the reward should be the result, not the applause." That quiet humility became the foundation of everything the initiative stood for. One afternoon, Grant walked through the Veterans Training Center built in Janelle's name. The walls were lined with framed photographs. Graduates, families, and stories of men and women rebuilding their lives. In one corner, a young man in a wheelchair was learning to operate a drone simulator. Another, with prosthetic limbs, was typing on a computer, smiling as he completed an application for flight school. Grant stopped beside him. "How's it going?" he asked. The young man looked up, grinning. "Better than it was 6 months ago, sir. They told me I'd never fly again. Guess they were wrong." Grant smiled softly. "Someone told me the same thing once." He looked toward the office where Janelle was seated, talking quietly with a new trainee. Her presence filled the space, not with authority, but with calm purpose. For the first time, Grant realized she didn't just change his company. She changed its heartbeat. Later that evening, the two of them stood on the rooftop of the center, watching the sun dip behind the Phoenix skyline. The air was still warm, tinted orange and gold. "You've built something extraordinary," she said. "We built it," Grant corrected. She smiled. "I just gave you a push. You did the rest." Grant shook his head. "You gave me more than a push, Janelle. You gave me perspective." She looked thoughtful. "Perspective is funny. You can't buy it. You can't fake it, and you can't force someone to have it. You only get it when you stop seeing people as what they do and start seeing them as who they are." Grant leaned against the railing, nodding slowly. "I spent 20 years believing success was about control. Turns out the moment I lost control, I found clarity." She gave a faint laugh. "You had to fall from pretty high up to see that." "Worth every inch," he said quietly. A comfortable silence followed. Below them, the city lights began to glow, tiny specks stretching to the horizon. Grant turned to her and said, "You ever think about flying again?" Janelle's eyes softened. "Every day, but I think I already am, just not in the way I used to." He smiled. "You know, I still haven't made good on that ridiculous bet." She chuckled. You mean the one where you said you'd marry me if I could fly your helicopter? He laughed, shaking his head. That one. I meant it as a joke, but now I think you were the one person I couldn't afford to underestimate. She looked at him for a long moment, then said gently, the best marriages, professional or otherwise, are built on respect, and I think we've both learned how to build that. The wind picked up slightly, rustling her hair. She turned toward the skyline again, her voice steady. I used to believe flying was freedom, but now I think real freedom is being seen for who you are, without the titles, without the judgment. Grant followed her gaze. And I used to believe success was power, but now I know success is impact. What changes after you leave the room? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city stretched beneath them, alive and endless. The story that had begun with mockery had become something else entirely. A testament to humility, second chances, and unseen greatness. Months later, during a televised interview, a reporter asked Janelle what advice she'd give to someone who feels overlooked, forgotten, or undervalued. She smiled softly and said, "Don't measure your worth by how loud the world claps for you. Measure it by how you carry yourself when no one's watching. The world doesn't need more heroes. It needs more people who remember their humanity." Those words went viral again, but this time neither she nor Grant paid much attention. They had work to do. New programs, more veterans to support, and lives to change. Back at the rooftop of the training center one evening, Grant watched another helicopter soar above the horizon, this time piloted by one of Janelle's students. He turned to her and said quietly, "Looks like your legacy is taking off." She smiled. "It's not mine alone. It belongs to everyone who decided to see beyond uniforms. Mine included." The sky dimmed to purple, then blue, and finally to night. The lights of the city shimmered like scattered stars. Grant looked up and said, "You were right. Greatness doesn't always wear a suit or fly first class. Sometimes it pushes a mop and changes the world anyway." Janelle nodded, her voice soft but steady. "Then remember that, Grant, and make sure others do too." He turned toward the camera crew recording a promotional video for the foundation and said his final words with quiet conviction. "Never judge someone by where you meet them. You have no idea what skies they've already flown. If you believe in stories that remind us of humility, second chances, and unseen strength, share this one. Because sometimes the smallest act of respect can change everything." Subscribe for more stories that keep that spirit alive.